Support for this podcast and the following message is brought to you by E-Trade from Morgan Stanley. With E-Trade, you can dive into the market with easy-to-use tools, $0 commissions, and a wide range of investments. And now there's even more to love. Get access to industry-leading research and insights from Morgan Stanley to help guide your decisions. Open an account and get up to $1,000 or more with a qualifying deposit. Get started today at etrade.com. Terms and other fees apply. Investing involves risks. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, LLC, member SIPC. E-Trade is a business of Morgan Stanley.
It's Saturday the 3rd of May. I'm Mike Willer in for Jamie East, and this was a week that saw Reform score a major victory on local election day. Donald Trump mark 100 days in power. Spain and Portugal hit by a mystery blackout, and Liverpool crowned Premier League champions.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
This week saw the local and mayoral elections take place on Thursday, along with the first by-election of Labour's government, and we'll have more on that shortly. But in the run into Election Day, there was plenty of drama as the parties campaigned and battled to score points with the electorate. There was bad news for the government on Tuesday as the number of people crossing the channel in small boats exceeded 10,000 for 2025. That's an increase of about 40% on last year. It came despite the government's pledge to smash the smuggling gangs, but Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was blaming unusually calm weather for the uptick in arrivals. She also announced a new ban on foreign sex offenders seeking asylum, which means anyone on a register won't be entitled to refugee protections. The amendment will be added to the Border Security Bill.
There can be challenges to deportations, to removals from the country, and those can be a series of different court challenges. And on that side, we're also strengthening the response.
The timing of the announcement seemed to be intended to appeal to Reform voters in advance of the local elections, and YouGov's Patrick English was warning that Labour will be under real pressure from Reform when the results come in.
We have Reform ahead of Labour by 3 points. It's not a big gap, it's not a large gap. It is what we would call the traditional margin of error associated with polling. But it certainly is the case that Reform are consistently up there, consistently at least tied with Labour.
With over 1,600 council seats up for grabs, and with the Tories expected to struggle to hold on to the 1,100 seats they currently have, you might have expected that very new Tory leader Kemi Badenoch would use Prime Minister's question time to make her pitch to the electorate. Instead, she chose to focus in on grooming gangs and renew calls for more inquiries.
At least 50 towns are affected by rape gangs. Places like Peterborough, Derby, Birmingham, Nottingham, Leicester, Rotherham, Rochdale and Preston. Is he dragging his heels on this because he doesn't want Labour cover-ups exposed?
It seemed like a strange choice, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer was keen to make the local elections a referendum on Kemi instead.
Tomorrow is the first opportunity the country has to pass their verdict on the Leader of the Opposition and the party opposite after general. Have they changed? Have they learned? It's passing verdict on the Leader of the Opposition. We'll see you next week.
Early Friday morning saw the results begin to flow in from the local and mayoral elections around the country. Labour held the mayoralities in Doncaster, North Tyneside and the west of England, but it was clear that Reform were having a big night. The BBC's polling guru, Professor John Curtis, said that even at the early stage, it was clear that there was a significant shift in the political landscape.
Reform have won more than half of the seats that have been declared so far. Looks quite likely that they may well end up with overall control, certainly of Staffordshire and maybe also of Lincolnshire. We may have Reform running local government for the first time.
Counting continued across Friday to decide the over 1,600 council seats that were up for grabs, with Reform on track to win a large number of seats and with both the Tories and Labour under pressure. There was also a by-election in Runcorn and Helsby, the first to be held since Labour won the general election, and there was a dramatic result. After a recount, Reform managed to win the Labour seat by just 6 seats, giving Nigel Farage's party a 6th MP, Sarah Pokin, who overturned what was seen as a safe Labour seat.
I know our victory here in Runcorn and Helsby will inspire the rest of the country to believe that they too can stand up for fairness, for what is right and for our British values.
and their voices can be heard.
That wasn't Reform's only significant victory, with former Tory Dame Andrea Jenkins becoming the new mayor of Lincolnshire and immediately using her position to target illegal migrants.
Illegal migrants, people come here illegally, they should be put in tents like they do in France.
People seeking asylum should also be put in tents?
Well, I think genuine asylum seekers, like Ukraine, etc., that's a different matter.
The Labour Party chairperson Ellie Reeve says that Reform's success may well prompt people more scrutiny of their policies, and that she doesn't believe this marks the end of a system of two-party politics.
I think people will be looking quite closely now at Reform's policies, not just the noise that they make, but actually what it is that they stand for. And we saw this week Nigel Farage talking about not having an NHS paid for out of general taxation. He's talked previously about an insurance-based system to pay for healthcare. That means people paying for their healthcare rather than the NHS as we currently know it. And I think people will be taking a long, hard look at some of those policies going forward.
Reform leader Nigel Farage was delighted with the night's results, but he was particularly pleased about the by-election win in what was a safe Labour seat.
Winning's obviously fantastic, but just think about the swing. Think about the change. This is heartland Labour Party. Their vote has collapsed, and much of it's come to us. And that does away with the sort of media narrative that somehow it's just us versus the Conservatives. It's not. This is a whole different politics.
Last Saturday saw Pope Francis's funeral in Rome becoming the site of the latest round of negotiations over Russia's war in Ukraine. In what may become an iconic image, Donald Trump met with Ukrainian President Zelensky on 2 plastic chairs in St. Peter's Basilica. The meeting appeared to spark something for Trump, who later mused on Truth Social that maybe Putin doesn't want to stop the war. It's a message that European leaders have been trying to get across to the US president for some time, and Russian opposition leader Dmitry Gudkov, who is living in exile, says Putin still wants to win the war.
Putin doesn't want any ceasefire. He believes that his army holds the initiative. There are a lot of resources to continue this war for several more years. And of course, he will be trying to delay all the negotiations.
Vladimir Putin was at it again on Monday, popping up with a surprise ceasefire offer. This time a 3-day pause around the 8th of May to mark the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory in the Second World War. He also called for Ukraine to join the 3-day truce, but showed no sign of responding to Ukraine's ongoing calls for at least a 30-day ceasefire. It's become increasingly clear that the Russian leader is engaged in delaying tactics, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says it's time to take the peace process seriously.
It's got to be lasting, because I don't trust Putin. I think if it's not a lasting ceasefire, he'll come back for more. It happened in the past, so that's why I've been so clear about the role that the UK and others have to play in Europe.
Donald Trump was clearly becoming increasingly irritated by Putin's behaviour, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned again on Monday that the US would walk away from the process. Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, was making her boss's demands clear in the White House press room.
The president has made it clear he wants to see a permanent ceasefire, first, to stop the killing, stop the bloodshed. And while he remains optimistic he can strike a deal, he's also being realistic as well. And both leaders need to come to the table to negotiate their way out of this.
The US and Ukraine finally signed the so-called rare earth deal on Wednesday, which will see a new reconstruction investment fund created, which the two nations will benefit 50-50 from. The deal nearly came unstuck again on early Wednesday, and it's taken a long time to negotiate after early versions saw a draft which gave the US 100% control over the fund. Yulia Sviridenko, the first Deputy Prime Minister, signed the deal with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and the hope is that the US will now have an economic incentive to continue to support Ukraine. Alexander Kara is a former advisor to the Ukraine Foreign Ministry, and he says with potential rebuilding costs of $500 billion, Ukraine needs US support.
So Americans will invest their money and technology into this deal. And then, which is really important for Ukraine, American defense assistance may be considered as a form of investment into this investment fund.
Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller was speaking relatively positively about the deal from the podium in the White House press room.
We'll move it and operationalize it as fast as we possibly can, but it's meant to pay back the United States for the hundreds of billions of dollars that our taxpayers have spent subsidizing the war in Ukraine.
The US approved the first sale of weapons to Ukraine on Thursday after the deal was signed, and Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik was cautiously optimistic that the atmosphere between the two sides seems to have shifted.
It seems that the relations between the leaders have warmed up. You see, for Ukraine, our intention is not for President Zelensky and President Trump to become friends. Our intention is to end the war and to have a just peace.
Tuesday saw Donald Trump reach 100 days in office, and if you're keeping track, that means he still has about 93% of his 4-year term to go. So far, it's been fast-paced chaos with tariff wars, deportations, and some unusual appointments, but the polling numbers suggest Americans aren't enjoying the experience. 45% of people in an NPR poll gave the president an F grade, and his approval rating is at just 42%. The White House decided to celebrate the day by starting a media war with Amazon, who had proposed putting a label on goods to reflect the cost of tariffs. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt didn't take it well.
This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that it's not a surprise because Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm.
Amazon quickly backed down, announcing that the label is only intended for their bargain brand Amazon Hall, but it turned out Amazon boss Bezos got a call from the president.
Jeff Bezos was very nice. He was terrific. He solved the problem very quickly, and he did the right thing, and he's a good guy.
Day 101 of Donald Trump's second term got off to a bumpy start as new economic figures showed the US economy contracted in Q1 of 2025, the first reverse in GDP since the beginning of 2022. That number was driven in part by a huge surge in imports as firms scrambled to stock up before Trump's tariffs took effect. There was also a 32% drop in consumer sentiment, which puts it around the same level as during the 1990s recession. At his cabinet meeting on Wednesday, Trump wasn't taking any responsibility for the numbers, though, somehow managing to ignore the fact that Joe Biden had seen 11 straight quarters of growth.
You probably saw some numbers today, and I have to start off by saying that's Biden, that's not Trump. I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country. But we took over his mess.
Day 102 of Donald Trump's second term saw the focus on National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The former congressman was busy on Fox News on Thursday morning explaining the new Ukraine deal. But shortly after that, CNN began reporting that he and his deputy had been sacked. Later on Thursday, President Trump announced that Waltz was moving to the vacant role of UN ambassador and that Marco Rubio will temporarily fill the National Security Advisor role, alongside his job as Secretary of State. Waltz was the one who added the Atlantic editor to the infamous War Plan signal chat, but he seemed to have survived that, and Vice President J.D. Vance was at pains to avoid using the word sacked when he spoke to Fox News.
Why was Mike Waltz let go?
So he wasn't let go. He is being made ambassador to the United Nations, which of course is a Senate-confirmed position. I think you can make a good argument that it's a promotion.
Early Tuesday morning saw a dramatic moment in Canadian politics as the Liberal Party won the general election. Justin Trudeau's party had been in power for 10 years, but disastrous poll numbers saw him step down to be replaced by former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney. The Canadian Conservative Party had been soaring in the polls until Donald Trump's chaotic intervention, which saw him try to bully Canada into becoming the US's 51st state. That strategy massively backfired, and the results show that the Liberals have done enough to win, although they narrowly failed to win a majority. David Lametti is a former Liberal Justice Minister, and he told CTV that this is an historic moment.
We've turned this right around, and thanks to Mark. It's Mark's leadership, Mark's personality, Mark's intelligence that got us through this. He showed Canadians a real change and a backbone that can stand up against Mr. Trump.
Canada's new Prime Minister is now officially Mark Carney, as the Liberals completed an incredible turnaround, coming from 25 points behind in the polls to win 169 seats out of 343, just 3 seats short of an overall majority. Not only did the Canadian Conservatives blow a 25-point lead in the polls, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre lost his own seat. Mark Carney spoke on Tuesday after his party's victory.
President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen. But we also must recognize the reality that our world has fundamentally changed.
Still to come on the Standout 7 in association with Metro, 55 million people get an unexpected power cut, and Liverpool pick up their crown.
Right after this.
BetterHelp Online Therapy bought this 30-second ad to remind you right now, wherever you are, to unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders, take a deep breath in and out. Feels better, right? That's 15 seconds of self-care. Imagine what you could do with more. Visit BetterHelp.com/randompodcast for 10% off your first month of therapy. No pressure, just help. But for now, just relax.
Welcome back.
Monday saw a bizarre event unfold that impacted a significant chunk of southern Europe. Around 12:30 in the afternoon, large swathes of Spain and Portugal suddenly lost all electrical power, leaving passengers stranded on metro lines and people locked out of buildings without internet access or phone signal. 55 million people were affected, and even now it's still not totally clear what happened, but it took most of Monday to get power supplies back up and running, and authorities say that there's no evidence of a cyber attack. Shops quickly sold out of water and some regions declared emergencies, but Spanish authorities were reporting 90% of power restored by Tuesday morning, while power was gradually restored in Portugal. You can hear more on what happened and how the UK is prepared for such an event in this Sunday's edition of the Sunday 7. Airports were largely able to keep operating on emergency power, but travel expert Simon Calder says it's a highly unusual event.
You can imagine a critical national infrastructure like this in both Spain and in Portugal. There will be multiple fail-safe protections, and those appear comprehensively to have failed, and it's led to absolute misery for millions of people.
The Premier League season doesn't officially wrap up until the 25th of May, but there's not much drama left for football fans. We already know that Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich have been relegated, and last Sunday saw the destination of the title decided. Liverpool welcomed Spurs to Anfield, and Arne Slot's men only needed a single point to secure this year's title and match Man United's 20-time title-winning record. In the end, the game finished 5-1 to Liverpool, and they were crowned champions on the Anfield pitch, much to the delight of manager Arne Slot.
Our main focus was to win this game. Everybody is saying you've already won it. But if you are part of it, you still feel the pressure of getting the point over the line. They sing quite hard now. And that makes it special, yeah.
Last year saw the BBC make a pilot episode of a show called The Assembly. It's based on a French TV show, and the guest for the pilot was Michael Sheen. ITV have now picked up the format and made it into a series with guests including Danny Dyer and David Tennant. The idea is simple. The guest is seated in the round with a panel of neurodivergent and disabled guests who act as the interviewers. The questions can be about pretty much anything, and it's a fascinating format. David Tennant was asked about his role as a trans ally and how he sees the current backlash against transgender people.
When I was a teenager, there was this thing called Section 28. We look back on that now as a medieval, absurd thing to try and say. And I think the way the trans community is being demonised and othered is exactly the same.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Hey, you know what would make your customer service help desk way better? Dumping it and then switching to Intercom. But you're not quite ready to make that change. We get it. That's why Finn, the world's leading AI customer service agent, is now available on every help desk. Finn can instantly resolve up to 80% of your tickets, which makes your customers happier and gets you off the customer service rep hiring treadmill. Finn by Intercom, the leading customer service AI agent, now available on every help desk.